Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So tomorrow is elections. Now to me, elections are like national holidays, and to be honest, they should be national holidays because you yourself are engaged in the process of governance. You're choosing your representative leaders. Well, you're choosing your representative leaders. Now, a large part of the population don't vote because a large part of the population believes that voting in no way changes what is. I would argue that their perspective of this is not all that accurate. So last year in a day, or a day before last year, the most qualified woman ever to cheat and run for a major party lost to a reality show host. Now, the reason why I say I think these people are somewhat wayward in their opinion that it doesn't necessarily mean anything to vote is because elections have consequences. Now, sometimes winning, putting somebody in that office in this kind of glorious victory where people are crying and people are raising their hands and raising their fists and this kind of glorious jubilation at what may come, sometimes that turns into the utter despair of sameness. Sometimes the glorious win wasn't a glorious win at all. It was a persistence of the norm. Other times, a bitter and terrifying loss bears the seeds of something different and something new. The reason I say it in that way is because I would argue that Hillary Clinton's loss brought about an interregnum within the Democratic Party. The idea of leadership, the idea of who was going to take control of the helm, who was going to be the leading force in the Democratic Party, the prevailing thought in that party. And I would argue that if the party's main argument was, we're the adults in the room, we are the ones who know how to win, we need you to sit down and shut the fuck up and vote for us, we know how to win, I would argue that that is proved not necessarily true. That's putting it too politely. Profoundly and utterly, completely wrong. Completely counterfactual. The Democratic Party, under the guidance of the neo-libs, under the guidance of the third-way Democrats, has lost everything all throughout the United States. House, Senate, Supreme Court, and the presidency. Not to mention one state house after the next, 66 over 99. So, when the question comes up, who should be, I guess, in charge, or who should be the adults in the room? Who should be the person with their hands on the wheel of this particular political apparatus? I'd argue that the failures shouldn't be. Which means we have a problem. And within that problem, a potential solution and a potential change. I have an earnest question to wayward Democrats, to open-minded Democrats, to people who consider themselves partially woke, partially lucid dreaming, whatever you want to call it. If you're watching this channel and you've leaned to the left in any particular way, I have a question. You're supporting the Democratic Party, or you may support the Democratic Party, or you may not, but assume for the moment that you are. You have several challenges posed to you as the left. You have environmental catastrophe just around the corner. The left is supposed to be the side that believes in science. Fair enough. Your scientist is telling you that your world is falling apart. Global catastrophic collapse in and of itself, based on climate, based upon the things that we're doing to pull energy out of the ground. Habitable collapse, based upon the way we do our food production. And mind you, the habitable collapse, the way we engineer our foods, how we get our foods, meaning essentially our food production, how we get our foods, animal agriculture, animal ag, is also destabilizing our climate and our environment. Both of those things are working in tandem. Both of those things are driven by human behavior, by this kind of capitalistic system of sorts. Keep going. 40% of the extinctions have taken place over the last 50 years. This is not me saying it. These are what scientists are saying. This is supposedly in the left's wheelhouse. The left says it believes in science. This is what scientists are saying. Let's keep going. Your nutrient density of the food's going down based upon the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It's almost like feeding plants junk food to a degree. The sperm count of men in the West dropping by 40% over the last 40, 50 years. Let's go to economics. You have an economic system, for the most part, that's a Ponzi scheme, that's bleeding jobs just so it can funnel more money to the top. You ship jobs overseas, and in shipping jobs overseas, you can essentially fire American workers and pay the people overseas less. You automate those jobs, meaning you're firing workers and you're putting in robots. Both processes are built within the capitalistic system itself. Everybody who's in the system, for the most part, companies and everything else, go with the idea of maximizing their profit. That's the modus operandi. And pursuant to maximizing their profit, workers are expensive. So to get rid of workers. The question I have to people who lean to the left, who consider themselves Democrats, who vote Democrats, do you believe that the Democratic Party, the way it's configured now, and is any way possible at meeting and dealing with those challenges? Are those challenges that the Democratic Party even come up with? Meaning, I would argue that we're in a post-reality state. You can say post-truth, but politicians have always lied. They've always lied through their teeth. There was one, I think it was Andrew Jackson or something like that, all the way back during that time, where they accused him of murdering a guy. He was sending out pamphlets. He didn't have internet at the time, so he couldn't necessarily send out internet memes. Post-truth. Post-reality. That's not just Trump. That's also the Democratic Party. Now, the Republican Party in no way addresses these issues because it doesn't care about these issues. They've built themselves around tax cuts. If we continuously tell people we're going to give them money back, those people will consistently vote for us. So we are going with this idea of tax cuts, in perpetuity tax cuts. You vote for us, you get tax cuts. Nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with the challenges faced by the public and the world. Tax cuts. So I shove them off the side of the board. The people who are supposed to deal with this is the left. The vehicle for the left in this country was supposed to be the Democratic Party. Now, when FDR had socialists and people in unions and all these other people on his tail, and he thought that they were going to upset the apple cart, he put in one reform after the next in order to stave off what he considered to be this kind of leftist revolution in this country. We've arrived at a new point. We've arrived at challenges that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are incapable of facing, and yet these things are cataclysmic in regards to their impact on us and our society. Do you believe that the Democratic Party, as it is now configured, is in any way capable of dealing with the challenges that face the individual, meaning workers themselves, meaning the 99% in this country, not to mention the global changes and the global issues that address this world? Do you believe it? What evidence do you have of it? Status quo is immensely soothing, but status quo hits a rock. The scientists, the people who you say you believe, I believe in science, that's what the left often says. Fair enough. They're screaming that an asteroid is about to hit the planet. They're screaming that your house is on fire. They're screaming that there are barbarians at the gate, and those aren't necessarily human beings in a sense. Some of those barbarians are intangible, but they are barbarians nonetheless, and they are coming to take what you have. They are coming to destroy the civilization that we've created. What do? It is soothing to vote for status quo. It is soothing to vote for this incremental shift to the right as opposed to actually dealing with the issues. But I ask the question, do you believe that the parties, the way these parties are configured, in any way are capable of dealing with the challenges presented to us as a world, let alone as a country? Do you believe it? Do you believe it? The answer to that question, of course, is no, they're not. It doesn't come up. They don't mention it. They talk about Trump. They talk about Russia. They talk about their values a lot, but nobody knows exactly what that means. All the while taking cash and still going with this idea of status quo. I understand that Republicans are batshit crazy. I understand that Republicans are going to essentially attack workers. They're going to attack the social safety net. They're going to try to undo these things that were put in place by progressives and workers all throughout the course of the last 50, 60 years. Fair enough. But if your vote is purely just to keep away Republicans, does that mean that you're giving Democrats a free pass? doesn't mean that Democrats can do whatever they want in that office, because your vote is always complicit. Meaning you're always complicit. You're always going to give your vote to the Democrat because you're always terrified of the Republican. That gives the Democrat a free pass. That means the Democrat is free to shift further and further to the right. And as you've seen from Carter to Clinton to Obama, is a further and further shift to the right. With the argument always, the Republicans are batshit crazy, pay no attention to me, look at how bad they are. If you agree with me that things are falling apart, if you agree with me that the house is on fire, that there are barbarians at the gate, that there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, if you agree with me with those things, and yet you're still voting for status quo, what is the point of voting for status quo? Post-reality. Voting for the soothing status quo, if the status quo is somehow going to actually change things, is a fool's errand. I am getting at your vehicle of change in this country is one of two things. Either a new party that's going to actually deal with and address these things, a new left, or destroying the Democratic Party entirely and replacing it with something new. And again, a new left. Ultimately, what you're talking about is a fundamentally new left from what's already there. And in making that fundamental new left, if you need to cannibalize the Democratic Party to do it, then you should cannibalize the Democratic Party to do it. I would argue that starts at a fundamental level of being willing to say no and stop being complicit into the soothing feeling of, oh my God, these other guys are crazy, let's just go with status quo. If status quo still gets murdered by those barbarians, if status quo still gets obliterated by the asteroid that hits the planet, if status quo is still a sinking boat, then what is the point in continuously voting for status quo? If you have a vehicle, meaning the left vehicle, the Democratic Party, and that vehicle is supposed to be philosophically bent to represent the interests of the 99%, and it is not, don't you need to do something to get that vehicle up and running? Does getting that vehicle up and running mean being complicit and giving your vote away as if it's a perfunctory thing? Your country, your world, needs changes. It needs radical changes. It needs things to be fundamentally different. And I'd argue that you're not going to get that fundamental difference. None of the issues that I've mentioned, none of the issues that scientists are screaming about, none of those things are going to be solved based in the model and the system to which we exist currently. It is currently the system, it is currently this model that constructed those problems in the first place. The left, what's considered the left, and let's put it in quotes, let's call it the faux left. That's the Democratic Party of the United States. Helped create those issues. They believe that moving around deck chairs on a burning boat is somehow going to deal with the fact that the boat is sinking. You have a fundamental issue. And I'd argue that fundamental issue is not solved by consistently voting for status quo, and status quo is the thing that caused the problem in the first place. A year ago, in a day, the most status quo candidate in the history of status quo candidate ran a campaign with a breathtaking level of arrogance. I've never seen that much arrogance in a campaign, ever. You're supposed to vote for me. I am the chosen candidate. All of these Democrats fell in line. Obama put me as Secretary of State, and because I supported him, all of the people in the country are supposed to support me. I'm going to choose Tim Kaine, of course. I'm going to cheat Bernie Sanders, of course. I'm doing these things because this public is going to vote for me. I don't give a shit what the public wants. I'm saving the public from Donald Trump, and that public should be happy, and they should get on their goddamn knees, and they should worship my presence. I'm Hillary Clinton. I'm the chosen candidate. I am fucking inevitable. And if you don't vote for me, you are sexist, and you're racist, and you're a Russian bot, you're a Russian plant. All of these nasty, disgusting things that were used to slander people who made the decision that, no, I'm done with status quo. We're going to hit a rock. We're on a burning bus. This boat is going down. We need to do something different. And the soothing thing of voting for the candidate who is less over-the-top gross is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to go too far into this. All I'm saying is elections have consequences. And we are at an interregnum. And by interregnum, I just means it's up for grabs. They're going to try to hold on to power in that party, and I would argue, don't let them. Part of them failing, or part of the process of them failing miserably and being cannibalized, being undone, to unravel the chaos that the third way Democrats have created within the Democratic Party itself, is to destroy that faction of the party, or at the very least put them in a corner. They are destroying this country, they are destroying this planet, and ultimately they have destroyed their own party. It's time for a change. That change starts with saying no. Doesn't mean voting for the Republican. Hell no. If there's a progressive on the ballot, fair enough. If there's a Green Party candidate, fair enough. If there's a Democrat that you full well believe that's representing your interests, fair enough. But the party needs to continuously fail until it gets to the point. And we need to be supporting and rallying behind platforms, not necessarily individual candidates. And what I mean by that is, what do you want to accomplish in the world? What do you want to accomplish in the world? What are the things that you believe are essential that needs to take place in order to deal with the issues that present us as a country and as a world? That's a fundamental question that often gets ignored. From an economic standpoint, what do you believe needs to take place in the country to make lives better for the people within this particular country? That's where you need to be. That's where your perspective in that case. That's your workable point of view. Just pretend like going along with this thing of voting for a candidate just because they have a D beside their name is insane. And that is a fundamentally losing strategy. They take your vote for granted and they do whatever they want in that office because they can always use the argument of be terrified of the boogeyman. There's a monster at the door. It's not just Republicans. I would argue that in the same way that Republicans are batshit crazy and all this other stuff, Democrats have a different tone. They're slightly sweeter in the manner they go about things. But again, I ask a fundamental question of the things that are presented to you as a world, as a society, the challenges that you face. These challenges didn't come out of the void. These challenges came out of the modus operandi that we operate as a world, as a culture, as a society. Do you believe that continuing with those things by voting for a party that believes in the status quo of those things is the way to deal in any way with those things? It is post-reality to believe that voting perfunctory for the Democrat is in any way going to change anything. You're trying to hold back the night while at the same time letting the night in this kind of soothing, incremental way. A year ago tomorrow, the most establishment candidate lost to a buffoon in the reality shows. And right now, 2018, 2020, you will have the opportunity to retool the party itself. It is a civil war. And the goal of this is to win. And part of that strategy is, I am not giving my vote to anybody that doesn't represent my interests just because you have a D beside your name. I will leave it at that. Thanks, guys.